This is the Crush Crowdfunding Podcast, the #1 place for people who want to launch on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. My name is Nalin, and I invite you to join me for tips, hacks, and insights to get you launched and fully funded. Hey everyone, welcome to another session of the Crush Crowdfunding Podcast. I'm really excited to have you here today and to really talk to you about crowdfunding and how you can absolutely crush your goal on Kickstarter and absolutely crush your goal on Indiegogo. Today I really wanted to talk about something really important that someone just asked me the other day. Actually, I ran into this person at a coffee shop and they were asking me like, hey, is it easier or is it better to raise money or raise funds for a product with a high price point? Or is it easier or better to raise funds for a product that has a lower price point, like $1,000 or $10? What's easier? What is better to do on crowdfunding? So I wanted to touch a little bit on that because I think that's a really great question that I'm sure a lot of people also have, actually. In order to kind of frame the conversation, I want to get you to think about exactly what makes up or what comprises that amount raised that you see on different campaigns. The amount raised meaning like that bar that keeps going up, that green bar on Kickstarter, that pink bar on Indiegogo. Like what comprises that, right? It's dollars, the dollars that are raised. So the amount you raised on crowdfunding actually is made up of two things. It's made up of one, the number of units that are actually sold, right? The actual number of the thing itself. Did you sell 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100? That multiplied by the price of the reward that you're listing, the price of that perk that people are buying, that people are pre-ordering. So again, the number of units multiplied by the price of the reward, the price of the perk, is exactly the amount you raise. Therefore, let's kind of think about it in this way. If you're trying to raise $100,000 on crowdfunding, you can either go two ways, have a high price point product, right? Or a low price point product. You can either sell many units at a low price point. So to hit $100,000, you have to sell like 10,000 units at the $10 price point. 10,000 units. Again, 10,000 units at the $10 price point to get to that $100,000 raised. On the other hand, if you're selling something at a high price point, you only have to sell 200 units at $500 in order to get to that same $100,000 raise. So again, 200 people versus 10,000 people. That's a very big difference between a low price point and a high price point. When it comes back to it, what's easier or better? There's really no way to tell. It really depends on the product and the community that you built around it. But when you're really thinking of like breaking it down to like your goal, you know, how much you actually need to raise and how many people that actually have to buy your product, this kind of puts it in perspective, right? If you're looking to raise $100,000 and your product is at $10, you're going to need a much bigger community before you even launch, so that you can get close to or get to that 10,000 backers. So let's talk about that again. I want to make sure that you guys understand this concept. So again, if you're looking to raise $100,000 and your product is at $10, you're going to need 10,000 backers. And so in your pre-launch phase, you're going to have to invest a lot of time or money in order to convince those 10,000 people that they want this product at the $10 price point. Maybe it's easier because it's a lower price point. It's more like an impulse buy for people. There's less consideration that has to be done for people to actually take the plunge to back the product, to actually spend the $10. It's not that big of a deal, right? It's not a huge expense. In some places, it's less than a lunch that they're paying for, the $10. And again, 10,000 people. On the other hand, if you're looking at raising $100,000 and your product's at the $500 price point, you're going to need a much smaller community to get that done. You're only going to need 200 people to back your project at the $500 price point to hit that same $100,000 goal. So my question for you is, what is your price point? Is it closer to the 500? Is it closer to the $10? Which end of the spectrum is your product? Is it a high price point product or a low price point product? Because when you're thinking about it, when you're at a low price point product, you're going to have to really spend a lot more time and effort in order to get people into your community before the crowdfunding campaign so that you can funnel them into your page and into backers and convert them into backers and actual real dollars for your crowdfunding project, right? When you're at the $500 price point, the community that you actually have to foster before and nurture before your crowdfunding campaign is a little smaller. But again, it might take a lot more effort to convince people, to educate people, to make people trust you, to spend $500 on your price point. So there's pros and cons to this. Pros and cons to each one. It's easier to convince people at $10 price point to just back on a whim. It's much more difficult at the $500 price point. But then again, you need less people to be convinced at the $500 price point versus the $10 price point. So when you're thinking about your crowdfunding project and your goal, whatever that goal is, think about it in terms of what the price point your product is going to be listed as and plan your community building efforts accordingly. Because if you're looking at a community of 10,000 people before you launch your campaign, it's probably going to be a little bit more legwork up front, a little more grit, a little more boots to the ground hacking or working or tactical implementation from you than needing those just 200 people for your project at the higher price point. One of the things to keep in mind too for a higher price point is that the average price point for crowdfunding projects is actually about $100 per reward. That's the reward amount, $100 or below. That's the reward amount that most people spend money on. It's not too much of a commitment, but it's enough that you know that you've made an impact, you made a difference, and you know that you probably will get this in the long run because you and a lot of other people are spending money, a lot of money to make this happen. That's kind of something to think about too, that like most people who do come on crowdfunding don't actually back projects at the $500 price point. I'm not saying it's not possible, but the average price point is about $100 or below. On the other hand, to play devil's advocate on that too, is that your crowd is going to be ready to back you at whatever price point that you are introducing if you're able to, one, find the right people, and two, educate and make them aware of the reasons why your product is at that price point. Most of the time, the way people are convinced about your product and the price point is by showing them that you're adding value. You're giving them so much value that that $500 price point is nothing compared to the value they receive. On the other hand, like sure, the average price point might be 100 or below, but your crowd and your audience is going to be ready to spend that much for your project already because they've kind of opted in knowing this. And the second thing is that you as an entrepreneur, you as the founder are spending time to really educate people about the value of your product, educate people about what your offering is, educating people about why $500 is just like a measly amount to spend in comparison to the value that people can actually receive from the product that you're launching when they do actually receive it. The question was like, is it easier or better to launch a product that's higher price point or lower price point? And to be frank, it's not better or worse, right? It's really not better or worse. It's just you have to think about what you want to crowdfund, like the number that you want to hit, right? The amount you want to hit for crowdfunding or the amount you need to hit for crowdfunding and kind of break it down into its kind of basic pieces. Literally, like what number of units do you have to get at that price point to meet your goal? Those are the two things. If you figure out those two things, you'll be able to really adequately prepare for your campaign and prepare for your launch. And again, if you are looking at something that's a really low price point and you're trying to get $100,000, you're going to need a bigger community. You're going to have to spend more time probably or more money up front in order to get that really big community for your launch, for your lower price point product. On the other hand, if you have a product that's a really high price point, you might not have to spend that much money or as much money or as much time beforehand to convince a tiny, smaller sliver of the community to actually want your product, want to actually back your project. Think about exactly what you want to raise, that final goal that you have, and work backwards. So there's nothing that's better or worse per se. It's just being prepared for whatever scenario that you have for your own project. Being prepared to get a big group of people together during the pre-launch, or being prepared to, get a really small, tight-knit niche group together before you launch for your project. Again, it really just depends on those two things. The number of units, that you need to sell in order to hit your goal at the price point that you're going to be offering. Again, there's no better or worse. So I hope that really helped you kind of think through exactly how you're going to be approaching getting to that goal amount, that dollar amount for your crowdfunding campaign, and really figuring out like, hey, do I have to spend a lot more time building this community? Do I have to get like a giant community? Do I have to get a medium-sized one? Do I have to get a small one for my launch? Because that is just, again, the 90% of the work comes before the launch. And to prepare yourself to hit that crowdfunding goal, you have to do that legwork beforehand. So thank you for being with me here today. If you need a crowdfunding expert, feel free to get in touch. You can get started by heading to crushcrowdfunding.com. Lastly, I would be really grateful if you could leave a review for the podcast because it will really help others who want to learn about crowdfunding just more easily find out about the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me and for subscribing to the podcast and for continuing to listen and just being here with me to go on this journey to crowdfund your product and your idea. I will see you guys in the next session. Thanks for listening to the Crush Crowdfunding podcast at crushcrowdfunding.com. Tune in the same time next week for more ways to crush your launch.